Exactly. We're already 7 moves in as well, so here we go. It is a Catalan. We are no strangers to that here at the Esports World Cup. Familiar territory for both players, but like we've seen before, it's a slow build-up, but when it reaches boiling point, you often get the fireworks in the late middle game.
That's right, the Catalan is Magnus Carlsen's favorite opening with white these days. This time, he gets it on the black side. It's interesting mind games from Hikaru Nakamura. Relatively solid start to this one. We see a quick trade of pawns in the center. White's bishop coming out. The argument here for white is that this Catalan, as opposed to a Catalan we saw earlier between these two, features a bad black bishop sitting on b7, staring at its own pawn. This is a problem piece. Magnus will aim to deal with that one a bit later.
It's like this was an instructional video. You can see the pawn still on c7, going to be a problem for black. Thinking about how we get rid of it. The problem piece, the light squared bishops are on the board. The one for white on g2 is doing a fine job of undermining the center and making sure that black has limited maneuverability. It's an improved version of what we saw earlier.
Absolutely. Magnus isn't super happy with his position. You know, even in his World Championship matches against Jan Nepomniachtchi, the Catalan did serve him well. It's something that he's played so many times. With black, the approach that he's had, he needs to find a way to activate that bishop. He first starts by taking away some squares on the right side. This move also sets up the idea of g5, which in some lines can tactically work when you need to drive that bishop from f4 away. One of the ways that black can activate that light squared bishop, the problem piece for Magnus, is by planting his own knight at the center of the board. Knight e4, if trades happen, that bishop has a bright future.
But now Magnus chooses to retreat, a very calm move there, getting the bishop out of the way of its rook. That knight e4 still on the cards for later, Tanya. Knight b4 as well. Hikaru pushes the pawn forward, saying, okay, you're not going to trap my bishop on f4. As now it prevents the g5 move forever for the near future. And Magnus chooses to lash out in the center. Not the most patient of moves, always a bit of a controversial one. Black often ends up with an isolated central pawn there, or hanging pawns. Which way will Magnus Carlsen recapture? Big question now. Question mark given to Hikaru's move. That's a very human one. I don't think we can read too much into that.
Recapturing there looked very, very natural from where I was at. So interesting. That question mark was there. We now have the knight hopping to the edge of the board, but looking to exploit some fun squares, some of those dark squares nearer the c5, b6 sort of territory, also keeping the queen pinned down to making sure that knight doesn't have free access.
You see how Magnus has quickly activated
forces of black
all
and
of his
potentially
pieces
coming in and winning material.
This is a very combative position. This pawn formation, the hanging pawns that Magnus has at the center of the board, is the most dynamic pawn structure in chess. And it all relies around, can black get a successful pawn push? Either the c pawn moving one step forward, or timed well, the d pawn advancing further on the board. Meanwhile, for white, before Magnus can do that, you want to continue putting the pressure on those two pawns.
Finally,
Magnus
the knight comes on
the knight on e4. He's
Very
threatening
strong piece.
e4 coming up next.
And we might just see that move now. The most natural move in the position. White's dark square bishop, by the way, has done a bit of a journey, but it's landed on the long diagonal, and there we go. It gets blunted immediately. White's dark square bishop is terrible. Exclamation point given to Magnus's last move. He's opening up the position, gaining space.
See how that
knight on e4, the
diagonal
MVP so
opens
far.
up.
And timed so incredibly well. One of the fallbacks in this pawn formation when you push d4 is that you have to make sure that neither of the knights, the white knights, opponent's knights, can land on a c4 square. Notice how Hikaru's knights are too far away from that route. That square cannot be occupied, and this gives Magnus plenty of opportunity to put his pieces on the right spot to create that
Hikaru can't
counterplay
trade his
before that
light square
happens.
bishop for Magnus's knight.
Wrong. Hikaru,
However,
the adrenaline pumping
however
from
powerful
the
it
previous
is,
game has been rushing
because
slightly.
then Magnus will have too strong of an attack with his light square
Yet
bishop
again.
and his
It is. I was actually going to
coming
ask
in.
that question, whether or not it was possible to put more pressure on the
It'd be impossible
c5
to
pawn
stop
by
it.
moving the bishop to a3. It also frees up b2 for a knight
The
if you wanted to
fiend
reroute it to
bishop,
c4. But the
on top
computer
of the
does not
king
like that
is
one
very
bit.
important
And
regardless
the
of
knight jumps in
if
to
you're
try
white
and
or
block
if you're
those
black.
plans as well and
You
be as
need to
annoying as
protect
possible.
it,
And
you
now
can't
the
trade
pawn
it
on
off.
a2 is under attack.
Otherwise, you
Might
leave
just
your
have
king
to
too
trade off for
vulnerable.
this knight.
So
Problem is,
Hikaru
if
can't
you
trade
do
his
trade
light
off
square
for this
bishop.
knight, we see it replaced by a black pawn on b4. and that only helps black carve out an outpost for his own
Can
knight.
white play
Let's show this
F3
on the board.
though?
For example, bishop takes. Let's see the bishop finally leave the board. Black recaptures, and the c3 square. It's all about that one. The black knight is about to jump in. It's going to be replaced by some very strong pawns if it gets there. And if you ever remove
might as
the
well trade
black
the
knight from the
dark
center of the
square
board,
bishop. It's doing
white
nothing.
would
It's
be
just
parting
staring
with
at the
his
opponent's
light
pawns.
square bishop. This is a disaster on the light squares, and the white king just way too open in these scenarios.
Exactly.
Yes, this might win a pawn for white, but the bishop drops back, the queen comes to the center, and checkmating ideas all over that diagonal.
Yeah, you can't trade
Lots
that.
of landmines
light square
here. Need
bishop.
to make sure we don't step on those in this position. And this is one of those
Alright, so he
classic
trades off the dark square
plenty
bishop
of ways
for
to
Magnus's knight.
go wrong,
because
even
that bishop
though
was
like
doing
an
nothing, it was
innocuous
staring at
move
the
could end
opponent's
up being a
pawns.
mistake if
I
you're
mean,
not
those
careful in these
pawns
sort of positions. And
on
there's not just one way to make a mistake as well. There's
B4 and
many ways to
C5
make that
too
blunder.
strong.
I'm
They're
loving
connected,
Magnus's
they're too
position
strong.
here. You know, he does go for that trade pointed out, defends that A2 pawn,
So
but
now
the C3
Hikaru
square
needs
that
to
we
get
highlighted, that's a big one
knight
for the
on
knight to jump on.
A4.
Magnus captures with the queen, defends the
He has
B7
to.
bishop,
He had
freeing
tempo on
up
the
that
queen.
knight
Why didn't
to
he
get
just
on
play knight
over
to
to that
B6?
beautiful post on C3. Currently, Hikaru jumps with the knight, with his own knight. Queen takes pawn, a threat on the board.
Well, given a question mark Hikaru's last move, but it makes a lot of sense. Tactically here, Magnus rushes in with his knight. Given a question mark, maybe it was better to start chasing away the white knight from f4, but now the key detail is that the white queen
Magnus is
can
trying to
go
get
and grab a pawn, since the white knight protects e2.
the
No forks for
pass
black,
pawn.
and it feels like the position is starting to liquidate Magnus.
Because if
Not
knight takes
maximizing his
C3,
advantage there.
Pawn takes
Been very
C3.
strategic so far. Hikaru hasn't been aggressive like he was in the previous game, so he's on the defensive, but so far, he's holding, maybe, just about.
And Hikaru's eyes there, darting all across the board, taking in all these tactics, wondering, does he capture the bishop first? Does he immediately go for queen takes pawn? Or will he have a more cautious, safe approach? I don't think that even exists in the position
Hikaru
with the
trades off
knight
the
hitting the
bishop.
queen, the A2 pawn, and the E2 pawn. We see the bishops come off the board, a flurry of
Queen
trades.
D4.
Magnus will pick up the pawn, eventually bring his rook, slide it all the way across, and put some pressure on the second rank. It's still advantage Carlsen.
Still advantage Carlsen, partly because the white knight is so silly on the edge of the board. Needs a few more moves to get back centralized.
So where do we find the follow-up plan now for Nakamura? That is the question. The pawn on A2 is being hit. The white knight on A4 looks a bit silly, like you just mentioned, David. There are a couple of problems to try and solve in this position. It is very much savable, very much possible to turn it around, but I think we're also reliant here on a little bit of inaccuracy from Carlsen, who still appears to hold the upper hand.
There we go. Hikaru goes and pins the black bishop. Very logical move. Also hitting black's A5 pawn. But how can Carlsen react? That's the big question. Does he have the opportunity to go and grab a pawn on A2, or does he have something even better?
Well, Hikaru is also setting up another trick, right? You're hitting queen takes pawn, but that knight that we were earlier highlighting is headed to a big square. Knight b6, knight d7. He's just pinned Magnus's bishop on f8. And I think he's coming for that bishop. That knight could jump there via c5 or b6, threatening knight d7, asking some questions to Carlsen. What do you have in mind as defense?
Big pin on that black bishop. The white knight has to get into the game. It's that simple. Without the knight, you're playing a piece down. That knight might never get another opportunity.
Was looking for ways to maybe try and dissuade that pin with a pin of our own. If the
Yeah,
knight comes into
C5.
c5, for example, can you get away with playing queen a7? But the rook on f1 protects f2, so unfortunately, as much as I want it to be, that's an empty threat.
Magnus trying to break the pin with the queen trade. He's done the hard work. He's won a pawn. And I don't think Hikaru can contemplate that queen exchange. There we go. He keeps the queens on the board. Still, the white knight is headed towards more healthy pastures. Can Magnus deal with that? The white rook not able to get to the game. That's the key.
Yeah, if you pick up that rook and put it on the 8th rank, it's game over for Magnus Carlsen. But that's far, far away from that. This is a dance between the queen and the knight against black's king and bishop on the 8th rank. And Magnus Carlsen has one move to stop that idea, to stop that knight from coming into the game.
How do you invest that move? Maybe the black rook can improve. You can't move the bishop anyway. The queen is needed as a defender. He goes pawn hunting. Very logical.
Rook b2, which
Hikaru
computer says is a
can't
blunder.
really
It
save
was a
that
miss.
pawn long term. That's another issue.
No, it's very tempting, of course, to go after that pawn, and it looks very vulnerable. The eval bar really wanted us to play rook d2 there to stop the knight coming in, a bit of a prophylactic move, trying to stop white's plans in their tracks, but this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I think what Magnus is saying is, you bring your knight in, I'm just going pawn grabbing there. I'll have two connected passes. My queen does a beautiful job of defending everything on the last rank. We're going to see this being played out. Is Magnus about to get
Outplays
greedy?
knight to
That
d7.
might just give Hikaru's rook the time to join the party to getting to the attack.
Oh, maybe we show this because big moment for Magnus Carlsen. He's got almost a 2-minute advantage, but it's not going to be straightforward to convert here. If he does take that white pawn, goes 2 pawns up, suddenly look at the bar, it would have shifted. We're looking at the green analysis board, the white rook shifts across, and if black takes a timeout now, for example, pushes a pawn, knight takes bishop is one idea, queen recaptures, and the white rook pins, wins with the black queen. Game over. Hikaru with a huge counter-attacking idea on the board.
Dangerous.
Ooh, Magnus. Instead, he forced the white knight to make a decision.
He does not go greedy in that position with all the dangers that existed. Instead, we see a trade-off, and that's just Magnus with what looks like a very healthy extra pawn in the position. You know, you could also sacrifice it at a4, b pawn moving up the board, complete control of the d-line, and with the knights gone, the attack looks a lot less menacing.
Hikaru hitting himself in the head just as he did yesterday in one of his matches. Look at this, a queen trade.
I don't understand.
You cannot get those queens off the board. That would be disastrous. He's sending a trap here. He's hoping that Magnus gets greedy with the black queen, allowing the white queen some checks. But Magnus, he's kept control so far.
Down on time,
Once those rooks off the board, all queens off the board, either way, Magnus Carlsen would be winning. Any major piece trade gets him closer to his end goal.
It was such a well-laid plan by Hikaru. Grab another pawn, and I would have enough activity to take this game back to you. Carlsen, though, seeing exactly what was going on, chooses not to do that. And now this is proving very, very difficult indeed because the pawns are rolling down the board on the queen side. This is feeling like Carlsen is going to be forcing an exchange sooner rather than later.
Ooh, this is flashy. The white rook pawn recaptures. Let's show the rook first. Rook takes pawn. There's a check. And if the white king shuffles to the side, checkmate on h1, game over. If the white pawn takes, Magnus there silencing the audience with a finger to the lips there. But pawn takes would allow the b pawn to run forward. Magnus looking very, very confident now.
Magnus is such a troll.
The white rook,
Such a
win
troll.
the white rook. We might be about to see a decisive result.
Is drawn and Magnus is loading it into the bow. Game number 4. This might be the end of the road for Team Falcons here at chess at the Esports World Cup. Firouzja needs to win on command with the black pieces in order for this set to go to Armageddon. Very possible, but let's see how this pans out.
Magnus Carlsen, whenever he's happy with a draw with white, he opens with his king's pawn. It's just a fact, he knows his openings. It's so difficult to create winning chances with black. He tries the Sicilian Alireza Firouzja. He's met with the Alapin, the c3 Sicilian. This is something Magnus has used on multiple occasions, including in the World Cup final against Prague, when he just needed a draw with white. Firouzja, he needs something special now.
And David, I know that the Alpine Sicilian is also one of your pet openings, something that you've employed so many times. Magnus Carlsen does it every time that he needs to shut down the game. Where do you think approaching this as blacks, as with the black pieces, will Alireza find his chances? What are the plans that he needs to put into place here?
Yeah, I think steering away from some of the main lines is the key. There are a lot of forcing lines in this opening. That's why Magnus has gone for it. There's a lot of opening theory that leads to sterile inequality, where you don't really get out into this game. You don't really maintain any winning chances. Okay, I was going to say, play something offbeat. Pawn to b6. We see the eval bar rise. That is very offbeat. Doesn't fight for the center, but I totally understand the reasoning for it.
I was going to ask you, when you would play the Alpine, was there a move by black that you feared that perhaps Alireza could try?
Pawn to d6 is the best move, but in terms of winning with black, I'm not so sure. Equalizing is normally the goal in chess with black, but not enough this time. b6, he just wants to fianchetto his bishop. Magnus might be forced to attack if Firouzja doesn't play in the center. Magnus is going to go on the front foot, but maybe that's not what he wants to do.
And for white, one of the very key ideas is to go d4 in these positions. You want to get that center control, get the bishop out to c4, try attacking the knight as well. But Magnus, he takes a pause, so definitely b6, that's a surprise.
So, Magnus Carlsen down on the clock. Okay, not by much, but it's so rare in this grand final, we might as well mention it when it happens. Alireza Firouzja, though, not looking just for an equal position. We need to win, remember. Pawn takes pawn in the center of the board. Firouzja looking like he wants to hopefully start building a little bit of clock advantage. Recaptures with the knight. And finally, Firouzja goes down to below 9 minutes. Still very, very early on in this game.
Still just move 6, and both players definitely freestyling. Neither side has studied this one before, we can guarantee that. Knight takes pawn on d4. Normally you want a queen there, but Magnus senses the white knight will be very active. The white queen could jump out early in this scenario, and Firouzja needs to just trust himself. Make moves at this point. Bishop comes out quickly. I like the way he's handled this opening. I've got to say, Alireza, I think he'll get it some chances at some point. The black knight kicked back meanwhile, and the game goes on.
It does go on, and this rivalry goes on. You know, I'm thinking right now of back in 2021 when Magnus Carlsen shocked the world, moved away from the World Championship crown, walked away from it, but said that he would be willing to fight if it was Alireza Firouzja who would challenge him, who would go on to win and then challenge him. That would make Magnus interested in getting back to the World Championship. That's the kind of respect he had. That's the kind of challenge he wanted to relish against the prince, Alireza Firouzja. And we never got that classical World Championship match.
I mean, you look at this opening and I mean, Alireza is such a unpredictable player, and I would say also an unorthodox player. That his style of playing is quite different from majority of players that we have. He really does think outside of the box, and here you can clearly see that both of his central pawns have not even moved from their initial position. I mean, um, that goes to show that he's not only facing the world champion, the greatest of all time, but he's also in the finals of the Esports World Cup, and the stakes couldn't just be any higher than they already are. And in such a game, to still be not going for the main line, or you know, staying in what they say is theory, he's still trying to, you know, play that unorthodox style of game to maybe perhaps throw Magnus off of his game. And perhaps that's something that Magnus really admires about Alireza, because in many interviews, Magnus has praised Alireza and admired Alireza's way of playing chess. So
We're
it'll
getting
be
the matchup
interesting to see
here at the
how
biggest
this goes.
global esports stage, at the esports arena. The king versus the prince, but so far it's been a Magnus Carlsen show.
Do you think maybe that that actually
I mean,
plays on
White is
Firouzja's
clearly
mind as
better
well,
in
knowing
this
that
position.
Carlsen has said that about you? It's very difficult not to let that affect you psychologically, going, oh, this is the match that he said he'd be happy to play. I really need to not disappoint. I
Ideally, you
need to
do
go
not
in with the bag. I
develop your
need to
knight to
really
that
prove
square,
myself.
because
And so far,
it's on the
we've
edge of
seen
the board,
flashes of that
and
brilliance that
the
does
knights
enable
work
him to
best in the
compete with
center of the
Carlsen at the
board.
highest level. That said,
Uh,
he hasn't been able to consistently show that throughout this grand
So
final, at
Magnus
least not
is
so far.
also keeping
And there's
pressure
two ways
on
you can take
Alireza.
compliments from the world's best ever player. You can say, oh, thank you, I'm going to prove you right.
Alireza can
Or you
convert
feel the pressure, you
from
feel
any
the
position.
expectation,
I
and
mean, he's so good.
instinct-wise, we've seen it so many times. Firouzja digs himself out of trouble on the clock. That's
Exactly.
because his instincts are just fantastic. And there we see Team
Great
Liquid,
survival
and
instincts.
the fans looking happy right now. But yeah, Firouzja just hasn't been trusting himself. He needs to go for it now. Pawn to h4, not liked by the computer, I should mention. Magnus Carlsen wants to win this one in style. He's trying to punish black for not finishing development, not castling yet. But the white e-pawn, a bit weak. I'm liking Firouzja's chances here, if he can strike somehow in the center.
This move just makes me feel like Magnus wants to have fun in this game. There's absolutely no reason for him to go for
Magnus
this. You know,
doesn't
you
care.
play the Alpine, it signals that you want to keep things under control. Then you push the H pawn voluntarily instead of continuing with getting development and getting your king to safety. Magnus Carlsen is in for a fight, but that is exactly what might give Firouzja his chance.
And remember, Magnus, when he was close to knocking down Hikaru in the final game of their match, at least the final of the sixth yesterday, he got nervous. He did blunder. Yep, it is possible. He's human. So Firouzja cannot kind of give up hope at any point yet.
Very easy to forget sometimes that our champions, our heroes, the GOATs, are human as well. And, you know, at some point, the torch will pass from Magnus Carlsen to the younger generation. He's here to say, yes, it will happen, just not today.
If Alireza wins this game and makes the comeback into the match to
Magnus is still
force an
young.
Armageddon, that would be a huge momentum shift. I'd go on to
how
say
long
that
he's
he'd be a
dominated the
favorite in
game.
that Armageddon. You know, given his speed skills, especially when you're down to 30 seconds, that is his best hope right now. And I think the way Magnus is playing, pushing his pawns, delaying his development,
continue dominating the game for decades.
this is going to be a feisty game.
Decades to come.
I'm going to call it. I think this is going to get crazy. I don't know the result, of course. Difficult to make any predictions here, but I feel that Firouzja is going to get some chances in this one. Already some tactics in the air.
I mean, look
The
at how
most obvious move would be to push a pawn forward, break open the black bishop, but maybe we could investigate a bit further, because Alireza Firouzja has what could be a golden opportunity to shock Magnus Carlsen right now. Not only can he open up that bishop, he can do it forcefully and in style. Knight takes pawn. If the white bishop takes back, then the black bishop takes on f3, removing the defender, hitting the white queen, and when the white queen recaptures, when the dust settles, bishop takes bishop, black has won a pawn with a nice pin to boot. If we go back, after knight takes e5, if the white knight recaptures, then black just says, calm, d6, open the diagonal for my bishop, please, and look at the white knights. Look at the black bishop. It's sniping, it's going to regain the material with interest. This is super complicated. White can even give a check at the end of this with his queen. The game goes on, but Firouzja, he has to take risks like this. He has to gamble.
But this is the one moment I'm glad that he's paused and spending time, because this is a critical decision. And it'll all be worth it. All those minutes spent will be worth it if he plays knight takes pawn. That's a huge advantage. You go up a pawn, your bishop becomes a big piece here.
And of course, we have the aid of the eval bar here. We have the aid of some very powerful engines, but Alireza Firouzja, he has the aid of his fantastic instincts. He's paused for a reason. Magnus Carlsen will be jumping out of his chair if he sees the move knight takes e5. He's got to play it. He's got to find it.
Has to be played, right? Especially if you spend so much time and energy calculating this out. I feel like it should happen on the board.
But do you think if Magnus has spotted it, he'll give it away? Because he's also the kind of player who just keeps that poker face until his opponent has made his decision. The more Alireza thinks, I think the higher chances that he spots it.
Who's going to spot it? Let's take a look at Alireza's screen, perhaps. It looks like he was about to push his pawn forward to d6. He does miss the opportunity. It was complicated. It was difficult. It was so hard to evaluate, but he could have played that move so much quicker. Now the black king castles. Status quo has been maintained. Magnus is holding this together with a pin.
But here's the thing, right? Because if Alireza did not go for knight takes pawn and wanted to make the move d6, again, you make it in 20 seconds. But if you take your time, then you find that central blow.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all for missing that. I think superhuman almost, that tactic. But what he's played, the fact that it took him over 2 minutes to play d6.
That's the problem.
That's big.
That's the issue.
So now 7 minutes plays under 4. Unfortunately, familiar territory here in what potentially could be the last game. Remember, if Magnus Carlsen wins this game, he does not only win the set, he wins the match. So Firouzja needs to win, needs to find a way to crack open the position and take this victory from Magnus Carlsen to force an Armageddon.
Well, there was tension at the center of the board, and what Alireza has done is he slides his rook, defends the bishop, and now can go on to win a pawn. That e5 pawn, now that the bishop in b7 is guarded, knight takes e5. Alireza again, and he does it, but he takes it with his own pawn first, doubling up on the e file.
That's very surprising. He could have done the same thing, but in a more forceful way. If black had taken with the knight, white would have been forced into a variation that could have happened anyway. He basically gave Magnus more choice. And although the position's still now level in the balance, black with a bishop pair, Magnus might be breathing a sigh of relief. He has control over the diagonals for now, although still a harder position to handle. I think easier to play for black, I'm going to say, because white's queenside pawns are slightly overextended, are slightly loose. And of course, we've been talking about bishops today. Alireza with that up his sleeve.
in an open game, right? And both bishops on the longest diagonal of the board. And guess what? The knight joining the party as well jumps onto that central d4 square. I wonder if Magnus will do the same, go knight d5. There are tactics in the air. He might want to trade pieces off, but it looks like that might work in Magnus's favor if you jump with that knight to the d5 square, given the tension along the c line.
It's a good way to trade pieces, get Magnus closer to the draw that he needs.
It's also frustrating that the queen can't just sidestep for Firouzja to c7 because of the ominous presence of white's dark square bishop, effectively meaning the queen stays on the d-line longer, increasing the probability that the queens come off at some point soon. We're trying our best to figure out a way to keep everything on, to keep the tension, to keep the complications, but I think black is struggling to do that here. And again, opportunity to trade queens, and this time it's Magnus that says no, maybe playing on the clock pressure here as it goes to 6 versus 3.
Exactly, Magnus has sped up again. Not for the first time, he's barely spent over 30 seconds for a single move in this game. And look at this, pawn to e6, the first blunder of this game, the first mistake. The white rooks are going to hit the black queen. It could be over now. The black queen has no good squares. Wherever you go, there's a double attack or a fork. Magnus now looking at the fans, smiling. He knows he's close. He knows he's about to get it. Team Liquid on the edges of their seats.
He knows this is over. The knight about to jump in with a big fork in the position, going material up. Firouzja will fight. He will try to play this on, but I'm not even sure for how long. This is completely busted for black. Magnus Carlsen vibing there.
There we go, knight for rook. Magnus has extra material. He's the exchange up. He's getting close now. The white rook's coming in. The white c-pawn sprinting forward. Firouzja has minimal counterplay. The white queen holds everything. Is this the final few moves of the Esports World Cup 2025? The black bishop trying to stem the tide, but it's desperate now.
Desperation on Firouzja. Magnus there, he wants to put the finishing touches as quickly as possible, but the whole show, the whole match by Magnus has been dominant so far.
This is absolutely incredible. Alireza Firouzja in a must-win situation. Magnus Carlsen had no business being this aggressive, gunning for this victory, but he only knows one mode. He truly has the heart of a champion, and he is displaying that here, saying, yes, I get that a draw is good enough, but here, watch what I can do.
Well, here at the Esports World Cup, he knows only one mode. That is that when liquid flows, it drowns everything.
Absolutely incredible stuff. Imperious from Magnus Carlsen, but it's not over yet. 5v2, material advantage. All the chips are stacked in his favor. Blunders can still happen. It is never over until it's over. He has to earn that full point.
Everything is earned here. Magnus Carlsen looking up. He's in calculation mode, trying to figure out if he can force it here and now. There must be a little bit of a ghost in his mind. There was a blunder in game one of this second set when he had a winning position up on time, up on the board. So Magnus, that's why he's double-checking everything. That's why he's slowed down slightly. The longer this game goes on, the more hope for Firouzja. It's just a challenge, staying alive.
Remember, you make your own luck. You need to try and find a way to tempt Magnus into that mistake. Those mistakes do happen, but Firouzja needs to make it happen on command. Queens off the board, and victory looking that much more remote.
And Magnus needs only a draw to win the match. He doesn't even need to win this game. He's completely winning.
And look at this, the c-pawn now forcing its way through. We're going to see the final move of the tournament.
Magnus Carlsen takes the victory. He wins game, set, and match against Team Falcons. Alireza Firouzja, Team Liquid will take home the 1,000 points for chess at the Esports World Cup. The GOAT reigns supreme, world #1, and now your Esports World Cup champion.
Okay. Hmm. I can take on d4 now. Mm. Like that. Stick with the queen. Rook d8. Should I rook d8? Rook a8 or f8? Let's play h6 first. Let's play rook f8. Hmm. Let's play a6. Rook d7, followed by rook a7, rook d88. Oh. Isn't that a blunder? Takes. Hmm. Alright, I don't think I have a choice but to play that. Probably gonna play rook d7. Okay, it doesn't. Rook a7. Oh, let's try to go for this pawn. Check, he just gives me that pawn. Go there. To keep doing this. It's annoying, but we have to. Let's go here. Oh, come on, mate. All right.
Ready for your next chess move? Hit follow and join SC Chess Club. Drop your boldest move in the comments. Let's see what you've got. Are you kidding me? Let's go!